collections. One of the things I said to Cinda, don't forget to collect sacks. Well, the next thing I know, I'm on this committee. So it's been a learning experience. As I said, the people at North, with their faith and their mission and their ministry and their commitment to it, have made me learn a lot of things about that through the years.
Okay, and thank you very much. And since Charlie's walking up here, and thanks so much to North for today. Charlie.
Welcome everybody. My name is Charlie Hurst. I'm the pastor here at North, and glad that everybody could be here with us today. Just a couple of simple things. If you're looking for restrooms, go out this door and just go straight back. They pass the vending machine and that little wall to your right, our restrooms. Coffee's out there. And any questions you can ask me. Again, I'm glad everybody's here and welcome, and hope everybody has a good experience this morning.
Okay, I do see Sharon on our right. Sharon, you want to come on up? And Sharon's church has the distinction of having metanoia. So maybe we'll hear more about that. I don't know. We're glad she's up and walking with us. We weren't so sure earlier this week.
Yeah, so I'm Sharon Grace, and I am the pastor at Bethany Presbyterian Church. And I got hooked up with MAHP when we had a gentleman sleeping on our steps at night, and he would come into the church and use our restroom and literally sleep on the pews in the day when I was there, and I wanted to know more about how we could help him. And then last year we became a partner church with Metanoia and was one of their overnight shelter locations for about 15 homeless people, and we're signed up to do that again this year. So Bethany has made a commitment to helping the less fortunate, and I'm really proud of them. They've gone a long ways. And this afternoon, or after lunch, or maybe, I don't know when, you're going to be playing a game that I created. So I hope you enjoy it and learn a lot from it.
Yes, and that's a great game, and we're going to be doing that at 11 o'clock, and we'll be out in the comments for that. And since we have so many people, we also have an additional commercial game, which someone or some group of 4 or 5 might play. We'll tell you more about that as we get close to that. Next would be Cinda Gorman, and I see her chat. I'm sorry, Bob. Okay, Bob, I'll step right up, please. From Church of the Covenant. They do a lot with Family Promise, which is the shelter for young families. And you'll see a video later on.
What am I supposed to say, Steve?
You're supposed to talk about how you've gotten into what we're doing.
The Covenant's been involved with North ever since the original building down on the street there, and so we do the monthly meals and try to help out with North as best we can in different ways. So we've been involved for quite a while. So now I'll turn it over to somebody who really knows what's going on. Cindy.
It's wonderful to get to see these people. We've been meeting on Zoom for over a year, and so hugs and fist bumps are certainly in order for us today. It's great to have that opportunity. My name is Cinda Gorman. I am co-moderator of this network, and I got involved in it because my daughter-in-law is a social worker, and she said I needed to do this. And so we got started as a network in the Presbytery, and it has been quite a learning adventure and curve for me, and I really appreciate the folks that I have met, and I'm so glad to get to be close to you today. I do want to already emphasize, this is our network box. It rotates to churches. Where's Gordon?
He's not here.
Well, he's supposed to take it to his church today, and then it will go to another church, and each month it goes to a different place. There are opportunities for people to spread it out, take a look at the books. Don't take them home for too long, because at the end of the month, it comes back and goes to another church. This is so people can decide, oh, I would like to buy this book, or I would like to make sure this book is in our church library, or I'd like to use this as a discussion with my women's circle, my men's circle, the session, whatever. So this is a way to try out these books. Unfortunately, somehow a lot of our children's books have disappeared, and I have to go do some tracking down. But we're delighted that that's a problem and somebody really wanted it. I'm going to introduce Brenda Horth, who was my immediate first co-moderator, and she is going to introduce our keynote for the day, just 2.5 years late.
Hi, I'm Brenda Horth, and I got involved with MAHP because I was doing homeless ministry in Chicago, where I went to seminary. And when me and my husband moved here, we got in touch with Sharon Core, who then put me in touch with Cinda, and so here we are. All right, and so now it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce one of my seminary colleagues, Chris Knestrick. Okay, so Chris spent 4 years in Colombia with the Christian Peacemaker teams. He has been involved working with and walking with the unhoused people of Cleveland since 2004. In 2017, he became the executive director of the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, or NEOP. And he and his team are tireless advocates for the unhoused people of Cleveland here in the areas of advocacy, education, outreach, and also they sell a street newspaper, the Cleveland Street Chronicle, which provides jobs for people who may be homeless or were homeless. So please join me now in welcoming Chris Knestrick.
Thanks, Brenda. I have a pretty loud voice, and I'm going to be using this whiteboard behind me, so I'm going to try to go out the mic. We'll see how that goes. But first of all, I just want to name that, like, if you have never read the Street Chronicle, you should. And the editor of the Street Chronicle is Brenda, so we know it's very well written, and she spends hours kind of editing and understanding what our vendors are saying about their own lived experience and making it a little bit more, I guess, readable for folks while keeping true to their original stories. So just huge thanks to you, Brenda, for your work. You've been doing that probably for 3 to 4 years now, 5 years, yeah. And just kind of a labor of love, and it's a lot, and just really appreciate that. And it's so much grounded in our work of the Northeast Ohio Coalition for the Homeless, which is to accompany and work with people experiencing homelessness in our community and to advocate with them and lift their voices and stand side by side with them as they both advocate for better policies in our community, educate our community about the reality of homelessness, and outreach folks that are experiencing homelessness. So just to give you a little bit of brief, you know, the Northeast Ohio exists to eliminate the root causes of homelessness while loving our diverse community through advocacy, organizing, education, and street outreach. Our direct service workers, we are kind of the host and hub of street outreach services in Northeast Ohio, where we have outreach workers that go out and work with people on the streets. We partner deeply with Metanoia often, and Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries, where we stand to make sure people have access to shelter, services they need, and more importantly, access to permanent housing. And we'll talk a little bit about this, but the solution to homelessness is housing. It's actually that easy. Like, what we need is to have people access housing, and that becomes a huge barrier, which we'll talk about. And so, I think we often talk about homelessness and understand homelessness from a particular lived experience or an encounter we had with someone that was experiencing homelessness. And, you know, the most important people to teach us about homelessness are those that have gone through it and are living it every day. So I'm not going to sit up here and kind of tell you what it's like to be homeless. I myself have never been homeless. No housing insecure for sure. I think what I want to do is take a step back and look at how does homelessness function as a system in our community, right? What are the root causes of homelessness, and why does homelessness continue, and why is it so difficult to get out of homelessness, right? So we often think of, so when we do our advocacy, we do our organizing, when we talk about the work of social justice and ending homelessness, what we have to do is change a system in our community that causes homelessness, right? And I say this, no one's homeless because they made a bad decision in their life, right? We've all probably made bad decisions in our life at one time or the other that could have caused us to be homeless, but not everyone became homeless because of some bad decision, right? There are other factors at play. And I want to just look at that and think about that with all of you, and I'm going to ask you to join me in doing that. So when I put this microphone down, it's like we're going to create the system, and I'm going to welcome you and engage you to participate in this, because I bet there's a lot of knowledge in this room. I've already heard a lot of that knowledge about why homelessness exists. So we're going to talk about that and look at it as a system over the next 50 minutes. Can someone give me like a 5-minute timer when we're like running out of time?
I can do that.
Okay. So I want to ask you all, what are the reasons for homelessness?
Lots of jobs.
Loss of job?
Yes.
What else? Why does someone become homeless? Evicted, right? 50% of the families in our system come to the family shelter. Whoever works at Family Promise, I heard that, great organization, come because they were evicted. There's no clearer way to become homeless than having someone come in your house and remove you from it, and you got to figure out where you're going to stay that night, right? 50% of the families, right? Needless to say that about 95% of the evictions in our community are for non-payment of rent, right? Simply, people don't have enough money to pay rent. They've lost their job, they have a low-paying job, whatever reason they couldn't pay their rent. What are some other reasons? Yeah. Mental health, right? Yeah, when we think about this, we often talk about access, right? Who has access to services? What else do we understand as mental health nowadays? This is kind of one of the things people talk about all the time.
Trauma?
Trauma, but that's a different thing. That's not what I was looking for, but that's very good. We'll come back to that. Addiction, right? So when we talk about mental health and behavioral health and mental illness, we understand that as part of addiction, right? So access to addiction treatment services. I mean, we are still kind of in the midst of an opiate epidemic in our community. Just recently, we had 2 overdoses under a bridge in the city of Cleveland that for folks that ended up getting fentanyl in their heroin. Yeah.
Spousal abuse?
Yeah. So domestic violence, right? We understand that's the other 50% of people that are entering our family shelter, people that are fleeing domestic violence, survivors of domestic violence, right? And that's how they end up homeless, right? They have nowhere else to go. Landlord what? Yeah. So I mean, I would clock that under a reason for eviction probably, but I mean, maybe we could even say landlord relations. We hear all too often that maybe someone's not getting evicted from their property, but their landlord sold their property or is removing them from the property, or this is actually pretty crazy, is that currently we do a task where we are canvassing the folks that are in North Collinwood, in kind of old Brooklyn Center, and in Slavic Village, we convinced people that are facing evictions because there are communities that have the least amount of information about their rights. And one of the things we found was that landlords are now hiring people to go in and illegally evict people through Craigslist. So I want to come back to trauma. What do we understand about trauma nowadays? Kind of historically, there's like, how we understand trauma is like, there's one group of people that disproportionately experience homelessness because of their trauma. What group is that? Veterans, right? We understand that. We have lots of veterans because of their PTSD. And many other reasons like experiencing homelessness. But how do we understand trauma now? So we understand it as toxic stress in our communities. And what we see is, how many people have heard of the ACEs test, the acute childhood experiences? And what does that say? Yeah. Anyone want to add anything to that?
That everybody has some form of trauma. That somebody has at least one. Everybody has at least one or two ACEs.
Yeah, everyone has one or two ACEs. If you score higher on it, you are more likely to experience homelessness in your life, right?
Also, if you were homeless as a child, your likelihood of becoming homeless as an adult is higher.
And so what we understand the ACEs is how like childhood trauma impacts our life later on, and I would imagine, and Charlie, but many people that are experiencing homelessness are also survivors of childhood abuse and trauma in different ways. And that, you know, when we think about toxic stress, they've looked at toxic stress and then immediately, you know, when you're living in a stressful environment, how many people make their best decisions when they're the most stressed out? Absolutely no one, right? And so we have communities and people that are constantly living under toxic stress, right? Whether it's financial, do I put gas in my car, or do I buy books for my child? Do I have a birthday party for my child, or do I fix the brakes on my car, right? And it can go on and on. And what we understand is that it lowers your IQ immediately by 10 points, right? So we have whole communities that are impacted by toxic stress that are forced to make decisions that are almost impossible when they're at kind of the most stressful point in their life, right? No one makes a good decision, and so, you know, I think that's really important to understand. What are some other reasons for homelessness?
Well, I just think of the rising costs.
Of housing?
Rising costs.
Yeah. Of everything, right? But affordable housing. How many hours does a single mom have to work at minimum wage in our community to afford a one-bedroom apartment?
Yeah.
74, right? 74 hours, right? So we often hear, get a job and get yourself out of homelessness, right? How many people have, maybe I don't want to ask you if you thought that, but I've heard that before, right? Why can't these people get a job? And what I'm telling you is when that is heard, what they're telling people is that a single mom with a child should be working 74 hours a week in our community to afford a one-bedroom apartment and raise their kids and have a healthy lifestyle. It is impossible, right? It doesn't add up, but that's what they're saying. They're saying that. What are some other reasons? There's bigger reasons, yeah. Yeah, contact with the criminal legal system. I don't even want to add justice in there, so I call it the criminal legal system. Anyone have an idea of how that would happen? how that would cause homelessness? Yeah. If you're at jail, you can't be at work, yeah.
You can't check work afterwards either.
Once you're out, people won't hire you.
Yeah, when you're out, you can't, you got the box, bed in the box kind of work.
And people won't rent to you
Why won't they rent to you?
because you're a criminal.
Yeah. So we did a study of some, actually, we did a study with a speaker who probably will talk to you a lot about this later, Maria Smith. But we did a study together and we looked at all the subsidized housing in our property-based subsidized housing. So this is all of guaranteed low affordable housing in our community, right? And 80% of them screen tenants look back their whole life for misdemeanors and denied housing based on misdemeanors. That is the affordable housing that we're talking about in our community, right? They are screening for misdemeanors and denying housing based on that. I don't want to raise my hand, but I bet people here have misdemeanors, right? I have a misdemeanor, but not even felonies, misdemeanors, right? But what is the system behind the criminal legal system? What propels the criminal legal system forward that we understand today?
Money.
Now, who's disproportionately put into the criminal legal system?
People have it.
Yeah. Black teenage boys, right? So what we understand is when we talk about what causes homelessness, I think we need to name racism specifically, right? And I want to talk more about this. Whether it's within the criminal legal system of whose communities are over-policed, who disproportionately enters the criminal legal system, who therefore has, disproportionately experienced collateral housing sanctions, which is the criminal background screenings. But let's talk about racism, right? So, like, the other side of this is how do we build, and this is why I want to talk about this, okay? If we look at our system in Cuyahoga County, 85% of those people are black that experience homelessness in Cuyahoga County, right? We have to explain that disproportionality, right? And poverty alone will never explain that, right? And so what we have to do is we have to point at something, and I think what we're saying is we have to point at racism, systemic and structural racism in our community as a leading cause of homelessness, right? So how is generational wealth built in our community? Housing? Specifically, what about housing? Home property ownership, right? And who historically has had the access to own property? White people, right? What are some ways that people of color were systemically stopped from owning homes? Redlining, right? You want to say what redlining is really quick in 2 sentences for a big challenge?
Restricting where they can move.
Yeah. Like putting a red line around a community that is that where people of color would say we're not investing in this community. You can't get loans, you can't do anything, and then people were unable to buy homes. What else? Charlie?
Right after the World War, we went around and put in the Cherokee mortgages for veterans and others that. She did that task, they put in there that those loans are available only to white persons, black people, but not eligible for those loans. Black people got rental housing projects in the city, they were not eligible for those loans.
For the, what are they giving the loan?
And it was written in federal law.
The GI Bill, right?
Because in order to get passed through the Southern Democrats, the system that the
And wasn't that just white men, not just white women? I mean, we have
So the GI Bill is a great example of like how many people have at least in my generation would be my grandparents had access to being able to buy a house because of their participation in war.
Isn't that also part of where we ended up running freeways when we started building them in the 50s? We're so proud of ourselves. We sliced communities in half and ruined the real estate values based on, well, they're not worth anything anyway.
Yeah, there's a great example of this happening right now that EAC is working on. I don't know how many people know about Euclid. It's a little bit different. Euclid Beach Mobile Home. It's a mobile home park in North Collinwood, right on the beach, and they decided that those 120 people that live there should no longer live there because they want to build a park on where they live, right? And these are people that have invested thousands of dollars into their home to be able to remain there. They bought their forever home there, and it's not a freeway this time, but it's a green park, right? And so that's some of the advocacy work we're doing. They just recently unionized there to kind of demand their rights. So, but yeah. So I want to talk about contract loans for a second, because I think this gives you a sense of what happened. Anyone know what a contract loan is? So when community scholars were unable to get loans from the banks, they would often enter into a handshake contract with the white owner of the property, right? And that contract would say that, you pay us this amount of money for 30 years, and then after 30 years or 15 years, you will own your house, right? And in those loans, if you miss one payment, this contract is null, right? So communities, someone would pay their mortgage for 10 years, lose their job, not miss a month, and then they would miss a payment, and the owner of the house would say, well, sorry, this contract is no longer good. We can sign a new contract for another 30 years if you want, but this contract doesn't matter, right? So communities were unable to build equity into their homes, right? So there's a study out of Chicago by a Jesuit priest that looked at this. In Chicago alone, he estimated that $20 billion worth of wealth was extracted from the black community and given into the hands of the white community through contract loans, right? Over the course of 30 years, right? So when we talk about generational wealth, and we talk about racism, and we talk about why people are experiencing homelessness, this has a lot to do with it, right? That disproportional number of the legacy and the history and the ways that it's continued to enact it today. So there's a couple other things that I just want to get moving before we go. What are some other reasons for homelessness? We often talk about young adults experiencing homelessness for this reason.
Aging out of foster system?
Yeah, aging out of foster care.
Credit scores?
Credit scores, right? That is similar to the kind of credit scores and criminal background screening is the biggest kind of reasons people don't get access to permanent rental housing.
Becoming disabled?
Yeah, ableism and disability are I would like to say ableism is actually the cause of homelessness and not their disability, right? We live in a society that's not built for people that are not able-bodied or and so they experience homelessness at a disproportional rate. So what we see what we see with young adults is they say around 60% of young adults in the United States experiencing homelessness identify as LGBTQ, right? So we were named that, it'd be heterosexism, transphobia. But why is that?
Because their parents abandoned them.
Their parents abandon them or don't accept them and tell them to leave, and where do they go? Where do they often go to?
They start out with friends, but they wind up on the street.
Yeah, maybe they go to their church, and what does their church tell them? Maybe not you all, but lots of churches.
Hopefully.
They say stop sinning, all these terrible kind of homophobic stuff, and they don't find welcomed in their church, they don't find welcomed in their community centers. Oftentimes they don't find welcome in our shelters, right? And so they end up on the streets. Cleveland, I don't know if you know this, but Cleveland is the epicenter of trans black murders. Right, more black trans women have been murdered in the city of Cleveland than anywhere else over the last 5 years. Last year, one of our clients, Tierra Maria Lewis, was murdered over on 74th and Cedar. So, this is a pretty good list. I think it's not all inclusive, right? Every story is unique, and some of this fits into everyone's story, but not always. But like, where do you go when you're homeless in Cuyahoga County or Cleveland? How does that work? Where do you go? So you live in your car, right? Or you can sleep on the streets. So this is the people we work with, right? People that are unsheltered is the term, or sleeping in places maybe you stay in an abandoned house. So right now we know 250 people in our city by name that are living like this in our community. MAHP, that's our organization, because that's who we work with, right? We have a by name list and we look at it. But where do you go? If you're not sleeping in your car, or where would you go?
I have no idea.
Honestly, what would you do if you lost your house today?
Probably go to family.
You would go to family, right? Yeah, so there's this whole other section of people doubled up, we call it, right? This number is almost impossible to exactly say. MAHP often says probably around 30,000 people. That's taking 10% of the people living in poverty in Cuyahoga County and guesstimating that at some point over the year they end up experiencing homelessness and go to double up. They don't necessarily go to shelters, right? If your family says, no, you can't stay here, what do you do next?
Go to my best friend.
Your friend's like, nah, I can't stay here. What is interesting, this brings us back to another point, is what we're talking about is oftentimes communities that have network poverty, right? These are whole communities that are don't have access to resources and wealth, right? Maybe they're like, oh wait, you got two families staying with me. Sorry, there's no room for you. So where do you go then? You go to the shelter. How do you get to the shelter in our community? Do you know?
You gotta go through central intake.
Yeah, coordinated entry or central intake. It is disgusting how some of these words kind of mirror the criminal legal system. But systems be systems. And they get around 8,500 calls a year about people trying to access shelter, right? And when it's coordinated entry, so then coordinated entry does it, says yes, so they say yes, you're homeless, they see if you have another place to stay. Where do they send you?
2,100. Some cases.
You think they're gonna send her to 2,100? Yeah, so there's 2,100. This is a shelter specifically for men. It's run by Lutheran Metropolitan Ministries. Norma Her. Who said that? Yeah. So where does Norma Her? Who runs Norma Her? And it is the women's shelter, right?
Salvation Army.
Salvation Army doesn't run a shelter for singles. Are you bringing your whole family with you to the shelter?
I was in the Harbor Lake complex after about 2,100.
Okay.
There for 2 years.
Was it as a shelter or as a different program?
In the PASS program.
In the PASS program. What is the PASS program?
That's
If you don't mind sharing.
for able-bodied people moving on up towards getting in housing.
Okay.
And I worked there in the internet world that did it 2,100.
So then,
I was a volunteer at 2,100.
great.
From 2011 to 2015.
Thank you for that. So then, say that again? The city mission has a shelter, right? You can go to the city mission. So I want to put this on here because I want to say two things about this. So the city mission runs Laura's Home, which is a shelter for family and women with kids, right? And then they run their, is it Passages? Which is a shelter for men. So the city mission is a little bit outside of the system we're talking about because you don't have to go through coordinated entry to get to the city mission. You can go directly there, right? For these other shelters, you have to go through coordinated entry.
Family Promise.
Yeah, so Haven Home. So the Haven Home is our family overflow. And then within that family system, there's 3 different shelters. Right? There is Family Promise, which is a family shelter. There's the Salvation Army, which is, anyone know the name of the family shelter? Salvation Army? No, it's Zoma George.
Oh.
It's their new building. And then there is the Westside Catholic Center. Right, so if you're a family, you're going this way, you're single, or if you are going as a single woman, you're going to the YWCA, and then if you're married, you're going to 2100. We also have, I'm drawing these too big, you can't fit anymore. But North Point, which is run by Frontline Services, but it's a youth, young adult shelter for young adults 18 to 24. You can go to the welfare office? They'll put you up there? Yeah, so what they would do is probably direct you to coordinated entry still, and coordinated entry would direct you to these things. The only way to get into these shelters, you could show up at 2100 in Omaha and they'll let you stay there for the night, but they'll make you go through coordinated entry the next day, right? That's kind of how it works. But like for the family shelters, you can't get here, you can't show up at Haven Home. You have to go through coordinated entry. It is kind of in the winter, it's a huge worry that NEAP works on is like, what if a family's in their car and they don't have a phone? How are they going to call coordinated entry? Why can't we just build a space that they can show up at and get served and have a shelter?
Is Providence House involved?
So Providence House is a little bit outside of this because I don't think you have to be homeless to get into Providence House, right? So Providence House is part of this because sometimes families will, you know, put their children in Providence House and go into the shelter system. But it's not totally part of the shelter system in that sense.
In the winter, there's metanoia.
Yeah, so we have a whole seasonal shelter system. There's Metanoia. There's some other places. There was Denison UCC Church opened up their doors. Metanoia opens up their doors. It's usually a partnership with a church. So if any of you go to the church, you can open up the doors for seasonal shelter. I'm sure Metanoia is looking for more locations. You know, so there's this whole seasonal shelter approach when it, you know, we live in Cleveland, we recognize that when people go and they need to get access to shelter beyond their original capacity. So I want to say 2 things. Our shelter system is absolutely family shelter is absolutely overflowing, right? So much so that they're even putting people in hotels right now. Like what families are experiencing, you know, during COVID, there was a small, you know, weren't a lot of new families entering into the system. I think it had a lot to do with like a eviction moratorium and some other reasons. But right now, what we're seeing is just like huge numbers of families coming into the homeless system. So much so that the capacity is like overflowing. One of the great things about our system is we have a commitment that guarantees an access to shelter if you are experiencing homelessness in Cuyahoga County, right? So you don't have to sign up, like you are guaranteed a bed, right? So everyone should guarantee a bed. That doesn't mean it happens, but there is that commitment and goal, right? So, but I think we're testing that goal with families because the capacity is so great. Because I don't think we understand what this COVID has wrought in our economically in our communities yet. So you get to the shelter system, you're in the shelter, what do you do now? Get a job.
Look for housing.
How do you get out? Yeah, so you, So you need to address their mental health issues. And that's going to get them out of help. So I want to be clear that this system is not built to address mental health issues. That is not what the system is made to do. This system is made to give you shelter and give you access to permanent housing. So to be clear, like all the mental health stuff, the drug treatment, all the other issues people face, like that is other services in our community. We could talk about, you know, Stella Maris, we could talk about treatment centers, we could talk about, you know, job placement, job training, all of that. And that should be all intertwined into this system. But this system is made to give you emergency shelter and housing. Yeah, so rapid rehousing. Anyone know? Sure, don't answer. Anyone know what rapid rehousing is? So what we do is, every family, now because of COVID, everyone has access to, you have to get in the system, but once you get into it, you get access to rapid rehousing. It is a short-term voucher for 12 months, and sometimes more, to be used in the private housing market. Right? So everyone should be out. If you're homeless for 3 days, you get access to rapid rehousing. The idea is to rapidly get you out of shelter, right? Shelter is traumatizing and a difficult place for anyone, but it's designed to get you into private housing as fast as possible, right? So you have this 12-month voucher.
Then you have the landlord that won't accept it out.
Yeah, so you gotta get landlords to accept, that won't accept the voucher, which is the biggest challenge we see, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. How much time do I have?
Probably another 10, 15.
Okay, great.
You're doing well.
And then we have something called permanent supportive housing in our community, and I think we have about 863 units of permanent supportive housing in our community. And this is specifically because our community took on a goal to eliminate a term I don't like, but chronic homelessness, right? Anyone know what chronic homelessness is here? So in our definition is if you are homeless for 365 days, or like 3 episodes, or 4 episodes in 3 years that equal 365 days, and are diagnosed with and have a diagnosis of a mental illness or disability, and you are a single adult, you get access to permanently supportive housing, right? You move in there and you have a 1-bedroom apartment, and they kind of put all the wraparound services in the building there, right? So I don't know, people Liberty. I think there's a young adult building going up close by here for young adults. But really, it's you don't have to do all you have to do is meet this definition. You go and then they provide wraparound services, right? It's called housing first. Housing first is the approach our community takes, and it's considered best practice. Is that you don't have to. The solution to housing is homelessness, and what we have to do is get people housed and then work on other issues that they would want to work on, right? But it's almost impossible to try to work on drug treatment when you're staying in the shelter for a lot of people. Or it's hard to find a job and get a job when you're living in a shelter, to get out every morning, walk, or do whatever to find a job to increase your income to be able to get a job, right? So like the idea is like, how do we get people into housing first and then work on some of the stuff they need to be able to maintain their housing? And this is for specific individuals, it's permanent supportive housing. Well, any other ways people kind of get out of the shelter?
Job training.
Job training, yeah. So definitely, like, there are people that succeed, like they do job training and then they find a house in the private market and they build up,
Commit a crime.
Huh?
So you hear of people who recidivism, they commit a crime and then they go to jail.
They go to jail. Yeah, I would consider, that happens, right? People, I guess you're not considered homeless anymore because, you're living in a cage, but I wouldn't consider permanent housing or any type of ways we should treat our fellow human beings. Life is too beautiful to live in a cage, but yeah, that's one way people do it. Have done or end up getting incarcerated and then get out. So we have Section 8. How many people know what Section 8 housing is? Some of them. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's housing where you get a voucher, and whatever your income is, only 25% of it has to go towards payment of the rent, and the rest is subsidized by Cleveland Metropolitan Housing Authority or some other government agency. So I think sometimes there's scattered site housing, sometimes it's one site. So basically your housing is subsidized with whatever you can afford to pay.
So while you don't have to be homeless to get a housing choice voucher thing, you know, it's income based, so anyone can apply. But you know, there are Section 8. There's both housing choice vouchers. So if you think about this, like housing choice vouchers they're a subsidy that goes with the individual, right? Like I personally, me and my family qualify for Section 8, and I can use that anywhere in the private market, right? And go find an apartment anywhere I want as long as it meets the requirements, right? And then there's the property-based Section 8 where the subsidy goes with the unit. So you're applying to live in a subsidized unit, right? And there's 135 or so property-based Section 8 in the community that people can apply to, right? But this goes back to as long as you pass the criminal background screenings, right? So HUD has determined, anyone know two people that are, what are the two reasons you're permanently banned from any type of Section 8 housing?
Drug use?
No, not drug use. Yeah.
Very sexual offenses.
Yeah, sexual offenses and cooking meth on federal property. Right, so if you've done those two things, like this housing's out for you. So the thing about HUD, and they just released new guidance around this, but it's still the same, is they leave all the other 10 screenings to itself on Section 8. So each, it's within their own discretion of how they want to screen their tenants, right? And so this is where you get 80% of property-based Section 8 doing life back, look-back periods for misdemeanors, right? And denying housing based on that. Okay, so we have PSH, we have Section 8, we have private market. Who are protected classes in our community? Veterans in Ohio are a protected class. So what that means is you cannot deny housing to someone based on their veteran status, right? Like you're a veteran, you can't live here. Yeah. Disability. What are the other reasons? Hold on. Don't try to get other people. Not a trick question. You probably all know this.
If you have children,
Who just said that? Family status, right? You cannot. That's a protected class. You can't ban based on family status. Think about work too. It's very similar. Like protected classes go back and forth between housing and work oftentimes. Can I don't want women living next to me? Am I allowed to do that legally? Like I don't want any woman living in my house ever. I don't like women.
Gender.
Yeah, gender identity and sexual orientation, right? In Cuyahoga County, at least. The Fair Housing Act said that you can't discriminate housing based on race, right?
And also color.
Yeah.
Is immigration status at all protected?
No. Any other ones?
Age.
Is age a protected class? I don't actually know. I don't think so. Yeah.
religion,
You don't think religion is a protected class, or you can't be like, I don't want. Charlie, we have to ask Maria if age is a protected class. I'm not sure if it is. Nope, education is not a protected class. So the big thing is source of income is not a protected class. What that means is everyone with these vouchers, landlords say, how many people have ever seen something that says no section A welcome here? How many people have ever seen something that says no Eden welcome here, no CMHA? What those landlords are saying in the private market is we don't accept these vouchers. We don't want them, right? So what we're seeing is families lingering at Family Promise, Haven Home, have permanent vouchers, right? Could be housed tomorrow and their rent will be paid for the rest of their life, and landlords just say to them, we don't want you. You're not welcome here. And so I say that to say, the other thing is criminal background screenings, right? Landlords do a criminal background screening and they just say, we don't want you here, right? So it's, I think you'll have a little information session on fair chance housing coming up, but so let's bring this all the way back, right? Who is disproportionately impacted? Whose communities are over-policed? Black and brown. Who disproportionately enters the criminal legal system? Who disproportionately has collateral housing sanctions? Therefore, they're disproportionately entering into our homeless system. Therefore, they are getting access to resources that are being used. But because you can discriminate based on source of income and criminal background screenings, they're not getting access to housing, right? But that is why homelessness exists right there. And so, sure, we can talk loss of a job. Does anyone here, how many people have lost a job and never experienced homelessness here? Anyone? Right? But when you have to lose your job and you have all of these other barriers, it means something different, right? It impacts you differently. So I guess I'll take a final moment to say, this is how the homeless system functions, right? And so these places are doing a large amount of work to try to overcome these barriers, right? And we know that, I would just say the other side of this is we also know is disparate impact theory says that a policy or a law in itself is equal to everyone, right? Like the criminal background screenings, white people and people of color all get the criminal background screenings, right? But it disproportionately impacts one community because of all these other things, right? And therefore they're racist policies and should not exist. Yeah.
So I just want to ask you, I think it was around the pandemic when Kyle County or City of Cleveland said racism is a public health crisis. What do you think? Has anything come of that? Was that just a joke? Or what do you think?
Yeah, so there's something come up with it. There was a paper written about next steps to take, based on this declaration of racism as a public health crisis. I have not seen any substantial and I'm not saying I'm right or wrong, but I personally don't know of any substantial steps that have been taken to alleviate the impact of systemic and structural racism in our community, right? In fact, I haven't seen any policies or laws that have come out of that to really impact that. I could be wrong though. I don't know everything. So, other questions before I end up here? Thoughts? Yeah.
The section 8, where you said sometimes it's a specific unit or it's a voucher. Who determines which category?
There are two different programs, right? So if you're looking to enter into the Housing Choice Voucher Program, you're entered into a lottery. So you sign up to an application, you do a lottery, they pick around 10,000 names a year. About 60,000 people sign up to get that voucher, qualify, right? And then they pull your names out of the lottery, and if you get the lottery, you get the voucher, right? So then if you want to, like if you're looking to live in a section, like a property-based Section 8 apartment, then you are then applying to that apartment, right? You're applying to Skyline Towers, Bond Towers, like you're specifically, your application goes to that building, right? So you're applying to live in a building that you know is subsidized and you meet the qualifications to apply. If that helps.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was the individual who could make that determination or that was coming from.
No, they can do both, right? Most people would probably do both, right? Like you would want to, like when we do our outreach and work with people, we're like, sign up for the Housing Choice Voucher program, and then these are some of the buildings that we should work to apply to if you want to.
I'm just wondering about kind of the education to figure it out and despair.
Yeah. I mean, I would let people with lived experience talk a little bit about the despair part and how do you overcome that. I would say that, like, this is not easy to figure out, right? Like, this is hard. Like, to work, to be able, not only that, is like, the system is not built for the person experiencing the system, it is built for, like, the people that, like, it's built for these people to be able to document data. Like, that's why like, coordinated intake exists, right? To be able to, like, get data on people experiencing homelessness, right? Like, you know, there's a great book called, I'm gonna lose it. No, I don't have it, sorry. But it like talks about coordinated intake and entry is like, it's all built around surveillance and data to be able to understand the homeless problem, right? Like this system is not built for people that walk through it in any shape or form, right? You don't know. Yeah, the other thing is like, people that are here, they never get access to any of these resources. You have to come into the system to be able to access rapid rehousing, right? So like, you know, who knows that? Do you think they call you at coordinated, when you call coordinated, they're like, you have another place to stay? They're like, well, I could possibly stay with my family, but you know, it's a bad situation. They're like, well, let's see if we can figure it out. Do you think coordinated says, well, you know, if you don't come in, then you won't get rapid rehousing, which is a 12-month voucher that you can use to live somewhere? No, they don't tell you that. Yeah, sure.
Between Section 8 and Shelter Plus Care.
So, Shelter Plus Care. So, Sheree is asking about a voucher specifically for, within the homeless system, there are some permanent vouchers that people can get that don't meet the status, right? They're called non-chronic vouchers. They're very rare and not like easily accessible, but certain people can access Shelter Plus Care vouchers that are permanent vouchers to be able to use, similar to the Housing Choice Voucher program, but a different program that is based on homelessness, not on income. Other questions? Totally clear? I wouldn't touch it. You can come up with anything if you ever are struggling with homelessness. All right, yeah.
I'm sitting here very frustrated. First of all, I can't hear you very well because of my hearing aids.
I'm sorry.
That's not your problem. I'm looking at your diagram here. That's a lot. There's a lot of problems. There's a lot of services.
We didn't name all the services.
And my impression, I'm not experiencing all this, my impression is that this happens primarily in the city of Cleveland, or close to the city of Cleveland. Way back when Mr. I can't remember his name, broke evicted, that was, it became a community read book 6 or 7 years ago. And I believe that you spoke at the Rocky River Library about the book and the issues. And at that time, the social worker, the Rocky River, said that people who need subsidized housing in Rocky River have to wait maybe a month or two. But currently, they had to wait 2 or 3 years for subsidized housing. So the question is, where do they go? They go down to Cleveland. So I guess what I'm challenging is the responsibilities of our suburban churches, communities, issues to due north and send them all to Cleveland, but to take action themselves in our suburban areas. There's places that we can build these kinds of things or have these kinds of services, but we don't do it.
Chris, could you restate so we could all hear what you said?
Sorry.
No, I meant to get it all. The question was about the responsibility of the suburban communities around issues of housing insecurity and homelessness, specifically because what you see is that when people are kind of like looking for subsidized housing in a place like Rocky River, and there's a waiting list, like where do they go? And where they go is like into the system, which is in Cleveland oftentimes. What is the responsibility of suburban communities? So I would say two things. One thing is, like, does your suburban community have source of income protections, right? Have you said that it's illegal for your community to say no Section 8 welcome here, right? What we see is often suburban communities have bans on some of these things, so people that are low income and people of color, right, their racist policies can't move into your communities, right? So my question for all of you would be, if you live in the suburbs, like what is your local government's take on source of income protections or criminal background screenings, right? Because so much of that is caught up in stereotypes and myths and aren't real, that like we are continuing to segregate our communities, right? And so I would say like some of the work is there, right? Is those advocacy issues in a suburban community. Like how are we, the Housing Choice Voucher Program is built that people can move to neighborhoods of opportunity. So someone that has a housing choice voucher, can they easily use it in Rocky River so their children and their families have access to the Rocky River school system, the library, all of that, right? Rocky River schools are amazing, right? And so that's part of the point of the program, right? So how are we making sure our communities can do that? And the people in our community can access, a beautiful community is a diverse community, and that's what we should be building. All right, any other final questions? I'm around for a little while if you want to talk some more. I think you have some experts that are real experts. I'm not a real expert, but some real experts that are hanging out with you the rest of the day. So they will definitely be either telling you that I'm wrong, which is totally okay, but also kind of giving you lots of great information. So thanks, everyone.